I should have known something was wrong when Philip texted me that morning. Wear the black dress tonight. The one with the collar. Staff meeting at 7 p.m. sharp. Not, our dinner reservation, or can't wait to see you, a staff meeting. At 26, I'd learned to read between the lines in the restaurant industry. But I told myself Philip was just being professional, keeping work and personal separate in front of the team. The Meridian occupied a converted warehouse in Manhattan's meatpacking district, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, the kind of calculated industrial chic that attracted food bloggers and trust fund kids playing at being foodies. I'd worked there for 2 years, pulling double shifts while saving every dollar for culinary school. Philip had promoted me to occasional prep cook 3 months ago, right after we'd started dating. He'd said it was because of my natural talent. Tonight was supposed to be our 6-month anniversary. My sensible flats, the ones that didn't kill my feet after a 10-hour shift, clicked across the polished concrete floor as the hostess greeted me with a smile that looked more like pity. Susan, everyone's already here. They're waiting for you. Everyone's already here. Not Philip's waiting or your table is ready. That should have been my second warning. I noticed Marcus, the sous chef, wouldn't meet my eyes as I passed the bar. Neither would Jenny, my closest friend on staff. The usually noisy kitchen had gone silent. I followed the hostess through the main dining room, my chef's notebook filled with recipe experiments and the menu concepts I'd been dying to share with Philip suddenly feeling heavy in my bag. The restaurant was packed, but not with the usual Saturday dinner crowd. I recognized faces, our entire kitchen staff, the front-of-house team, regular customers, the food bloggers Philip had been courting for months, even Tom Chen from the Manhattan Food Review. 50 people easily, all turning to watch me walk. All of them silent. Philip sat at the large center table, the one we reserved for private parties and VIP guests. Prime real estate for visibility. But he wasn't alone. The woman beside him had the kind of blonde hair that cost more to maintain than my monthly rent, perfectly styled waves that caught the Edison bulb light like spun gold. Her white blouse probably cost what I made in a week. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. I knew her face from magazine covers and restaurant review bylines. Barbara Mason. The food critic whose 3-star review could make a restaurant, whose single scathing paragraph could close one. She'd destroyed 3 establishments this year alone with reviews that went viral for their cruelty. I stopped 3 feet from the table. My notebook suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Around me, I heard the subtle sounds that made my stomach drop, phones being pulled from pockets, the quiet beep of someone starting to record video. Philip stood, his expression carefully neutral, the same face he used when firing someone who'd messed up an order. Susan, he said, his voice projecting to reach the entire room. Thank you for coming. We need to talk. Thank you for coming. Like I was a vendor he'd called in for a meeting. Not the woman he'd kissed goodbye that morning. Not the girlfriend he'd promised to celebrate 6 months with tonight. Philip, what is this? My voice came out steadier than I felt, but my hands had started to shake. He gestured to an empty chair across from them, across, not beside. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Please sit down. This concerns everyone here, but especially you. I didn't sit. Every instinct I possessed, every lesson learned from years of reading a room, screamed at me to turn around and walk out before whatever was coming could hit me. But pride locked my knees in place, and something else too, a stubborn need to understand why the man I'd trusted, the man I'd opened up to about my dreams and fears, had his arm casually draped across Barbara Mason's chair. I wouldn't run. Not in front of 50 witnesses. Not before I understood what was happening. Philip glanced at Barbara, who gave him an encouraging nod and a smile sharp enough to draw blood. He cleared his throat, and I watched him transform into the businessman I'd seen negotiate with suppliers and investors, cold, calculating, completely devoid of the warmth he'd shown me in private. I've been thinking about the Meridian's future, he began, and with those words I knew. I knew before he said it. about what this restaurant needs to reach the next level to compete with the top establishments in Manhattan. My fingers tightened on the notebook, knuckles going white. Barbara and I have been discussing a partnership, he continued, each word landing like a physical blow. Her family owns the Mason Restaurant Group, 15 establishments across the city. Her reviews have influenced Manhattan's food scene for a decade. She understands this world in ways that... He paused, his eyes finally meeting mine. In ways that require a certain background, a certain pedigree. Around us, the silence had become absolute. Even the kitchen had gone quiet. Everyone was listening. Everyone was watching. And everyone had their phones out now, recording the moment when Philip Turner explained to his waitress girlfriend why she wasn't good enough. Before we continue with what happens next, and trust me, you do not want to miss this, hit that like button and subscribe. I post stories like this every week, tales of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice. Also, drop a comment telling me what time it is where you're watching from and what city or country you're in. I love knowing where my viewers are around the world. Now, let's see just how cruel Philip can be. Philip reached for his champagne glass, tapping it with a knife. The crystalline ring cut through the silence like a blade. Thank you all for coming tonight, he said, his voice carrying that performative warmth he used with investors. I wanted you here to witness an important announcement about the Meridian's future. And about my future. He turned slightly toward Barbara, who placed her manicured hand over his. On her ring finger, a diamond caught the light, massive, ostentatious, impossible to miss. Barbara has agreed to become my wife, Philip announced. Her family's restaurant empire, combined with her influence in Manhattan's culinary scene, will elevate the Meridian to Michelin star status. This is the partnership I need. The partnership this restaurant deserves. The words landed like punches. Around me, I heard gasps, whispers, the sharp intake of breath from someone behind me. My vision tunneled, everything going slightly gray at the edges. As for Susan and I, Philip continued, his tone shifting to something almost condescending. What we had was a learning experience. For both of us, really, but especially for Susan. I think she may have confused professional mentorship with something more personal. It happens in this industry. People sometimes misread guidance and opportunity as romance. Barbara leaned forward, her expression dripping with false sympathy. Oh, sweetie, she said, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. Don't feel bad. Some people are meant to serve the plates, darling, not create what's on them. There's no shame in knowing your place. My chef's notebook slipped from my trembling fingers. It hit the concrete floor with a dull thud, pages scattering, months of work, recipe experiments, menu concepts I'd perfected during stolen hours after my shifts. The braised short rib with coffee reduction. The deconstructed tiramisu. The handmade pasta techniques I'd taught myself from YouTube videos at 2 a.m. All of it spread across the floor like garbage. Philip didn't even glance at it. To avoid any confusion about roles here, he said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket pocket, I'm adjusting Susan's schedule. Weekend shifts only, back to front of house exclusively. We need clear boundaries between professional relationships and personal ones. He set the pap, are on the table, my new schedule, already printed, already decided. This wasn't a conversation. It was an execution, planned and staged. My eyes burned. Around me, phones had emerged from every pocket and purse. Camera flashes sparked in my peripheral vision. Someone was recording this. Multiple someones. I could see the screens held up, red recording dots glowing like dozens of accusatory eyes. Marcus turned away, unable to watch. Jenny stared at her shoes. The food bloggers typed furiously on their phones, already crafting their posts about this drama. Tom Chen from the Manhattan Food Review had his camera out, documenting everything with journalistic detachment. I'm sorry, Jenny whispered from somewhere behind me, but she didn't move. Didn't step forward. Didn't say it loud enough for anyone else to hear. No one did. 50 people who'd worked beside me, joked with me, accepted tips from tables I'd bussed, all of them frozen, silent, protecting their own positions while I stood alone at the center of my own destruction. Philip reached across the table and placed his hand over Barbara's, squeezing gently. I hope you understand, Susan. This is what's best for the Meridian. What's best for everyone. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. 50 pairs of eyes burned into me, waiting to see if I'd cry, if I'd scream, if I'd crumble. My legs felt like they'd been filled with concrete. Philip wasn't finished. The truth is, Susan, you were never really right for this world. He gestured around the restaurant, at the exposed brick and carefully curated aesthetic. Your background, your education, community college cooking classes don't prepare you for the kind of fine dining the Meridian aspires to. You have enthusiasm, I'll give you that. But enthusiasm isn't expertise. Barbara examined her nails, already bored now that the interesting part was over. She'd gotten what she wanted, the ring, the restaurant owner, the viral moment that would cement her reputation as Manhattan's most ruthless food critic. I'm being generous by letting you keep your weekend shifts, Philip continued, his tone magnanimous now, like he was doing me some incredible favor. You're a decent server, Susan. If you can accept your proper place here without drama, we can all move forward professionally. But I need to know you understand. Do you understand? My mind flashed back to 3 months ago. Philip hunched over my notebook in his office, reading my recipe for bourbon-braised short ribs with coffee reduction. This is derivative, he'd said. You're trying too hard to be clever. 2 weeks later, he'd presented that exact dish to investors as his own concept for the new seasonal menu. I remembered him at a supplier meeting, casually mentioning his idea for handmade squid ink pasta with brown butter and crispy sage. The recipe I'd perfected over 20 failed attempts in my tiny apartment kitchen, the one I'd shared with him the morning after we'd first slept together. I remembered my mother's face when I'd told her about Philip. The way her expression had shifted from happiness to concern. Men like him don't see women like us as equals, baby, she'd said, her voice gentle but firm. We're projects to them. Possibilities. But never partners. I'd defended him. Told her she didn't understand. That Philip was different. The scattered pages of my notebook lay at my feet like fallen leaves. 6 months of work. 2 years of savings. Every penny I'd earned from double shifts and weekend overtime, carefully hoarded in a culinary school fund that now felt as distant as the moon. I could accept this. Take the weekend shifts. Swallow the humiliation. Keep my head down and keep saving. It would take longer now, years, maybe, but I could still get there eventually. Or I could walk out. Keep my dignity. And lose everything, the job, the savings account tied to this employment, any chance of a reference in an industry where Philip knew everyone who mattered. My hands shook as I bent down, reaching for the nearest page. My handwriting stared back at me. Deconstructed tiramisu, coffee-soaked ladyfingers, mascarpone mousse, cocoa dust presentation. The door opened. The sound cut through the suffocating silence like a gunshot. Every head turned. Even Barbara looked up from her nails. And the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. A ripple swept through the restaurant like wind across water. Conversations died mid-word. Marcus dropped the wine bottle he'd been holding. It hit the bar with a crack, but didn't break. Jenny's mouth fell open. Even Philip's face drained of color, his performative confidence flickering like a candle in a draft. The man who entered didn't walk, he commanded space. Dark hair slicked back from a face that looked carved from marble, a powerful build evident even beneath the black sweater that probably cost more than my car. Dark eyes swept the room with a kind of cold calculation that made people instinctively step back. 2 men flanked him, massive in tailored suits, their hands clasped in front of them in a posture that screamed security detail. I knew who he was. Everyone in Manhattan's restaurant industry knew who he was. Dante Marchetti. The name got whispered in kitchen corridors and business meetings. Self-made billionaire who'd arrived from Naples with nothing at 16 and built an empire by 35. Rumored Mafia connections that no one could prove but everyone believed. Owner of Marconi's, Bellissimo, Casa di Lusso, half the city's most exclusive establishments operated under his umbrella. A man who valued loyalty absolutely and betrayal not at all. Philip had been trying to secure a meeting with him for months, desperate for the kind of partnership that could legitimately elevate the Meridian into Manhattan's elite dining scene. And he'd just walked into this. Dante's gaze traveled across the restaurant with predatory focus. It landed on my scattered notebook pages, moved to my face. I could feel tears on my cheeks now, hot and humiliating, then shifted to Philip's carefully arranged tableau of dominance. To Barbara's bored expression and expensive diamonds. To the 50 phones recording everything. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite anger, but something colder. Something that made the scar along his jawline stand out like a white slash. He moved forward with fluid grace, and the crowd parted like he was Moses and they were the Red Sea. No one wanted to be in his path. No one dared. Barbara straightened in her chair, suddenly uncertain. Her hand slipped from Philip's. Even the food bloggers lowered their phones slightly, as if afraid of being noticed. Philip stood, smoothing his jacket, forcing his expression back into professional charm. "Mr. Marchetti," he said, extending his hand, voice pitched to carry confidence he clearly didn't feel. "We weren't expecting you until later. This is just a staff." Dante walked past him. Didn't shake his hand. Didn't acknowledge his existence. Simply moved past Philip like he was furniture, a minor obstacle between point A and point B. He approached me. Every instinct screamed to step back, to look away from those dark eyes that had seen things I probably couldn't imagine. But I was already frozen, already humiliated, already broken. What was one more moment of powerlessness? Dante stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, broad enough to block out the rest of the restaurant. The scent of expensive cologne and something else, something darker, surrounded him like an aura. He looked down at my scattered notebook pages, then back at me. And when he spoke, his voice carried a slight Italian accent that made every word sound deliberate, dangerous. "Signorina," he said quietly, but somehow everyone in the restaurant heard it. "I believe you dropped something." He knelt. Dante Marchetti, billionaire, rumored mafia boss, a man who could buy and sell this restaurant 100 times over, knelt on the concrete floor and began gathering my scattered recipe pages. His movements were surprisingly gentle, careful, as if each paper were a precious document instead of the dreams of a nobody waitress. He collected every sheet, arranged them neatly, and stood. When he handed them back, his dark eyes met mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "These designs," he said, his voice quiet but somehow carrying to every corner of the silent restaurant. "They're brilliant. The flavor combinations, the innovation, the way you balance tradition with creativity." He tapped the page on top, my deconstructed tiramisu. "This is the work of an artist. A real chef, not someone playing at it." I stared at him, unable to process what was happening. My mind felt like it was moving through molasses. Dante reached into his pocket and produced a small black velvet box. The air left the room. I heard Barbara's sharp intake of breath, saw Philip go rigid in my peripheral vision. He opened it. The ring inside caught every light in the restaurant, a large diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in what looked like platinum. It made Barbara's ostentatious engagement ring look like costume jewelry from a department store clearance rack. "I've been looking for a chef with vision for my new flagship restaurant," Dante said, his Italian accent making every word sound deliberate, weighted with meaning. "Someone who understands that genius comes from passion, not pedigree. That real talent is born from hunger and determination, not handed down through family names." He removed the ring from the box, holding it up. Light fractured through the diamond, casting rainbow patterns across the concrete floor. "Someone who would do me the honor of creating something extraordinary together." It was theater, clearly, obviously theater. A performance for the same 50 people who'd just watched Philip destroy me. But his dark eyes held something genuine beneath the calculated gesture. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Like he saw in me something he recognized from his own past, his own climb from nothing. Will you accept? My hand trembled as I extended it. I couldn't speak, didn't trust my voice not to break. But the gesture was answer enough. Dante slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, heavy and solid and real. His hand lingered on mine for just a moment, warm and calloused, the hand of someone who'd worked for everything he had. Then he turned to Philip. The temperature dropped. The barely leashed menace in Dante's expression made Philip physically step back, his polished confidence crumbling like wet sand. The lady is with me now, Dante said, his voice soft and absolutely terrifying. Whatever meeting you thought we had, whatever partnership you imagined, cancel it. I don't do business with men who waste brilliance, who steal from those who trust them, who humiliate artists to make themselves feel powerful. He moved closer to Philip, and even Barbara shifted away in her chair. I suggest you remember that, Dante continued, each word precise as a knife cut. Remember it every time you see her name in reviews. Every time you hear about Marchetti's new flagship. Every time you realize exactly what you threw away. He turned back to me, and his expression softened fractionally. He offered his arm. Shall we? I took it. And as we walked toward the door, my hand in the crook of his elbow and his ring heavy on my finger, 50 phones captured every moment. But this time, the story being recorded was completely different. This time, I wasn't the discarded waitress. I was the woman claimed by a king. The leather seats of Dante's car were buttersoft, the interior darker than the night outside. One of his security men drove while the other sat in the passenger seat, both silent as statues. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The ring caught streetlight as we passed under a lamp, throwing brilliant sparks across the car's interior. It felt impossibly heavy on my finger, like wearing a promise I didn't understand. Why? The word burst out of me, sharp and desperate. You don't know me. What was that? Strategic, Dante said calmly, his accent wrapping around the word. And personal. I turned to face him fully. That's not an answer. He was quiet for a moment, his profile sharp against the passing lights of Manhattan. Then he spoke, his voice low and measured. 3 weeks ago, Philip Turner came to me with a partnership proposal. He showed me menu concepts for an upscale Italian fusion concept, innovative, brilliant work that would have impressed me. Except the handwriting on the original notes didn't match his. Neither did the voice. My breath caught. I have people who investigate these things. They traced the recipes back to you through a server who felt guilty about Philip's theft. Marcus, I believe his name is. Dante's jaw tightened. I came tonight to confront Philip about stolen intellectual property. Instead, I walked into a public execution. He turned to look at me fully, those dark eyes intense in the dim car. I've built everything from nothing, Signorina. I came to New York at 16 with $200 and a cousin's address. I worked kitchens, construction sites, anywhere that would pay cash. I recognize real talent when I see it. And I don't tolerate thieves. So this, I held up my hand, the ring glinting. This is what? Revenge on Philip. This is business. Dante reached out, gently stilling my shaking hand with his. His touch was warm, calloused. The ring isn't an engagement. It's a contract. I'm offering you the executive chef position at my new flagship restaurant, Marchetti's. Opening in 3 months. My heart hammered. And the condition? We maintain the appearance of a relationship. 3 months, maybe 4. While I dissolve my business ties with Philip and establish your reputation in the industry. By the time we part ways, you'll be known as the genius behind Marchetti's menu, not as the waitress Philip Turner discarded. It made cold, calculated sense. A business arrangement. Professional. Practical. except for the way his thumb brushed across my knuckles, just once, barely there. Except for the gentleness with which he gathered my scattered recipes. Except for the controlled fury that had radiated from him when he looked at Philip, like he was barely restraining himself from something violent. I should refuse. This was insane. Dangerous. Too fast, too much, too everything. But the ring on my finger felt like reclaimed power. Like possibility. Like everything I'd been working toward for years, suddenly within reach. I want creative control, I said, my voice steadier now. Complete menu authority. No interference, no suggestions, no Philip-style theft of my concepts. Dante smiled, a dangerous expression that didn't quite reach his eyes, but held something like respect. I expected nothing less. He extended his hand for a formal shake, sealing the deal. When I took it, his grip was firm and warm and felt nothing like a simple business transaction. Welcome to Marchetti's, Chef Bliss. I woke to 73 missed calls and my phone vibrating like it was having a seizure. The video had gone viral overnight. But scrolling through my notifications with shaking hands and yesterday's mascara still smudged under my eyes, I realized the narrative wasn't what Philip had intended. The clips spreading across TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter didn't focus on my humiliation. They focused on Dante's entrance. The way the room had gone silent. The moment he'd knelt to gather my recipes, calling them brilliant. The ring, oh God, the ring glittering as he slid it onto my finger. His cold dismissal of Philip, that barely leashed menace in his voice. The lady is with me now. Social media had crowned it the most epic revenge moment of the year. Hashtag Mafia boyfriend was trending. So was hashtag Philip Turner is trash. Food bloggers were digging into my background with journalistic fervor. They'd found my community college transcripts, interviewed my instructors who praised my natural intuition for flavors. They'd documented my double shifts, the culinary school fund I'd been building dollar by dollar. Someone had leaked screenshots of my original recipe notes with timestamps, proving Philip had stolen concepts I'd created months before presenting them as his own. Marcus had come forward. So had two other former Meridian employees who'd quit after Philip had taken credit for their work. Barbara Mason's PR team was in crisis mode. Her "some people are meant to serve the plates" comment had been clipped and shared 100,000 times, sparking outrage about elitism in the food industry. Her follower count was dropping. Restaurants were distancing themselves from her reviews. Philip's investors were demanding meetings. The Manhattan Food Review had published a scathing editorial about integrity in kitchen leadership. And then Dante's press release hit. It was masterful. Clinical. Devastating. He announced me as executive chef of Marchetti's, his new flagship opening in 3 months. The release included photos of my recipe notebooks, professionally photographed, beautifully lit, my handwriting and concepts displayed like art. Testimonials from culinary experts Dante had shown them to, praising my innovative approach to modern Italian cuisine. A full biography that positioned me not as a rescued victim, but as a discovered genius whose talent had been suppressed by someone threatened by her potential. The narrative was complete. And it had nothing to do with being saved. But the arrangement had requirements. We need to be seen together, Dante explained over espresso in his penthouse the next morning. The guest suite he'd installed me in had better thread count than anything I'd ever owned. Dinners, events, the occasional photograph. Nothing excessive, but enough to make it believable. So we played the part. Dante's hand at the small of my back as we entered charity galas. Dinner at Marconi's where he'd listen intently as I explained my vision for Marchetti's menu, his dark eyes never leaving my face. Photographers caught us leaving his building together, my hand tucked into the crook of his arm, that ring impossible to miss. But the strangest part was the work itself. We spent hours in the test kitchen of his penthouse, professional grade, better equipped than most restaurants. I'd cook, he'd taste, and we'd discuss not just flavors but costs, suppliers, logistics. He taught me the business side, negotiating with vendors, managing kitchen politics, building a brand that lasted. He wasn't the mafia boss rumors suggested. Ruthless in business, yes. Calculating, absolutely. But legitimate. He'd built his empire through brilliant strategy and an almost supernatural ability to spot undervalued assets before anyone else did. Late one night, pasta sauce simmering and wine flowing, he told me about Naples. About hunger. About proving himself in a country that saw him as disposable labor. I told him about my mother's 3 jobs. My father's absence. The determination to prove that talent mattered more than zip codes or last names. We'd both been underestimated. Both dismissed by people who thought breeding mattered more than ability. The fake relationship was starting to feel dangerously real. It happened gradually, then all at once. Dante taught me how to read a supplier contract, how to spot the clauses that would lock me into unfavorable terms. He showed me kitchen politics, which sous chefs would undermine a female head chef, which ones would follow talent regardless of gender. He explained branding with the precision of someone who'd built an empire from recognizing what people wanted before they knew they wanted it. Never apologize for your vision, he said one afternoon, reviewing my menu proposals. The moment you soften your voice, they'll assume you're uncertain. Confidence isn't arrogance when you've earned it. In return, I taught him to cook. Not taste, he could taste, could identify every component in a dish with frightening accuracy. But to cook. To understand how flavors built and transformed, how heat changed molecular structures, how timing meant the difference between transcendent and merely good. Here, I said one night, guiding his hands as he kneaded fresh pasta dough. Feel how it resists, then yields. That's when you know it's ready. His hands stilled under mine. We were close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with flour dust. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. Like this. His voice was quieter than usual, rougher. Exactly like that. The late nights in the test kitchen became something neither of us acknowledged but both felt. We'd open wine to pair with dishes and end up talking until 2 a.m. He told me about Naples, the hunger, the desperation, the shame of arriving in America with nothing. About building his first restaurant from a failed pizza place no one wanted. About the food critics who'd called his cuisine immigrant food with barely disguised contempt. I told him about my mother's hands, permanently swollen from cleaning houses. About my father leaving when the bills got too high and the American dream too far away. About the guidance counselor who'd suggested I consider realistic careers like retail management instead of culinary school. We'd both been underestimated. Both told our success was luck or ruthlessness or anything except what it actually was, relentless work and undeniable talent. They wanted me to stay small, Dante said one night, staring into his wine glass. To be grateful for whatever scraps they gave me. When I succeeded, they called it dirty money. Mafia connections. They couldn't accept that I simply outworked and outsmarted them. Philip told investors my recipes were charmingly amateur, I said. Then presented them as his own brilliant concepts. When I tried to speak up, he said I was being emotional. That I should be grateful he was mentoring me. Dante's jaw tightened, that protective anger I'd started to recognize. He's a thief and a fool. So is everyone who underestimated you. He looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted. The air between us felt charged, dangerous. 3 months was supposed to be enough. A business arrangement with a clear end date. But as Marchetti's opening night approached 6 weeks, then 4, then 2, both of us stopped mentioning when the relationship would end. The way he watched me work, with genuine admiration that had nothing to do with performance. The way I found myself reaching for his hand without thinking, in cars and at events, and once, memorably, in the middle of a heated discussion about plating aesthetics. The trust we'd built, the intimacy of shared wounds and late-night confessions. This wasn't fake anymore. And neither of us knew what to do about it. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by courier to Dante's penthouse while I was testing a risotto recipe for the 100th time. Philip Turner vs. Susan Bliss. Breach of non-compete agreement. Theft of proprietary recipes and trade secrets. Demanding $500,000 in damages and an injunction preventing me from working as a chef in Manhattan for 2 years. My hands shook so badly I dropped the papers. By Wednesday, fabricated documents were circulating online, menu concepts from obscure restaurants in Chicago and Portland that supposedly proved I'd plagiarized my original ideas. The timestamps were cleverly manipulated, the sources just obscure enough to seem plausible. By Thursday, Philip was giving interviews. Smooth, sympathetic, perfectly calibrated to play the victim. Susan is talented in her own way, he told Manhattan Food and Wine, his voice dripping with false generosity. But I think she confused professional mentorship with something more. When our relationship ended, she became vindictive. And when Dante Marchetti showed interest in the Meridian, well, he paused, letting the implication hang. I think we all understand what happened there. It's obviously fake. A publicity stunt to legitimize her sudden rise. Barbara Mason's allies in the food criticism world began publishing think pieces. The problem with celebrity chef culture, when connection matters more than credentials. Is Susan Bliss really a culinary genius, or just good at attaching herself to powerful men? The culinary world, always hungry for gossip, began to whisper. Was she really talented? Or had she simply traded one powerful man for another, more powerful one? Marchetti's reservation system slowed. Investors started making concerned phone calls. The carefully built narrative of my legitimate talent was crumbling under coordinated attack. I found Dante in his office at 2 a.m., on the phone with his lawyers, his voice cold and precise as a scalpel. When he saw me in the doorway, he ended the call. "One word from me," he said quietly, dangerously. "One word, and Philip Turner will never work in this city again. I'll buy the Meridian out from under him. I'll make sure every supplier, every investor, every food critic knows exactly what he is. He'll be cooking at a highway diner in New Jersey within 6 months." The offer was tempting. God, it was tempting. To let Dante's power and connections destroy Philip the way Philip was trying to destroy me. But I shook my head. "If I let you fight my battles, Philip wins," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "He gets to say I needed a man to save me. That I couldn't succeed on my own merit. That every achievement I have is because of who I'm sleeping with." Susan. No, I moved into the office, sat across from him. I need to defend myself. My own way. With my own voice. Otherwise, what's the point? I'll just be trading one form of dependence for another. Dante studied me for a long moment, those dark eyes intense. Then something like pride flickered across his face. "What do you need?" "Access to my original recipe archives. The timestamps on my notebooks. Testimonials from my cooking instructors." And I took a breath. A kitchen. Witnesses. I'm going to cook. Let my work speak for itself. He smiled then, genuine, dangerous, proud. "Now you sound like a chef." My counteroffensive was surgical. First, I released my complete recipe archive, 5 years of notebooks, photographed page by page, uploaded with timestamps and metadata intact. The evolution of every concept Philip had claimed as his, documented in my handwriting, dated months or years before his original menus appeared. Cooking instructors from my community college classes provided testimonials on camera. Former Meridian coworkers came forward with stories of witnessing my creativity, of Philip dismissing my ideas only to present them weeks later as his own brilliance. Then I gave an interview. Not to a gossip blog or entertainment site, but to Siva magazine. 45 minutes of uninterrupted conversation about my culinary philosophy, my vision for food as art that should be accessible to everyone, not gate-kept by the elite. My journey from serving tables to commanding kitchens. I didn't mention Philip once. Didn't mention Dante except to credit him with recognizing talent others had overlooked. I let my work speak. But the most devastating move was the pop-up dinner. 50 seats. 50 of the most influential food critics, bloggers, and culinary journalists in Manhattan. In Marchetti's kitchen, 2 weeks before official opening. Just me, my mise en place, and witnesses to every moment of preparation. No assistants. No sous chefs. Just Susan Bliss and her talent. I cooked for 4 hours straight. The menu I'd been dreaming about for years. Squid ink pasta with brown butter and crispy sage, the bourbon-braised short ribs with coffee reduction, deconstructed tiramisu that honored tradition while reimagining it completely. The reviews were transcendent. A revelation, wrote the Times. Technical mastery married to emotional intelligence. The most exciting new culinary voice in a decade, declared Food and Wine. Philip's lawsuit quietly disappeared. Opening night at Marchetti's, the restaurant was packed to capacity. Reservations booked solid for 3 months. And there, at a corner table trying desperately to look casual, sat Philip and Barbara, diminished, desperate to be seen at the city's hottest new establishment. I stood in my kitchen, commanding my brigade with confidence I'd earned through fire. The tickets came fast and steady. My team moved like choreographed dancers. The symphony of a professional kitchen at full throttle sang around me. When the last plate went out, Marcus, who'd left the Meridian to join me as sous chef, nodded toward the dining room. "They're calling for you, chef." I emerged from the kitchen to a standing ovation. 50 tables, 200 people on their feet, applauding. I saw tears in my mother's eyes at her table. Saw Dante watching me with undisguised pride and something deeper, something that made my chest tight. Saw Philip and Barbara sitting while everyone else stood, their faces masks of forced politeness. Later, after the last guests left and my brigade had broken down the kitchen, I found Dante waiting. The ring was still on my finger, heavier now with meaning that had nothing to do with contracts or business arrangements. "So," he said, that dangerous smile playing at his lips. "About this 3-month arrangement." I was thinking. I kissed him. Flowers still dusting my chef's whites, exhaustion making me dizzy, success making me brave. I was thinking the same thing, I said against his mouth. His arms came around me, strong and sure and real. I finally understood. My value had never been dependent on who claimed me or validated me. I'd created my own success, proved my worth on my terms. And now I was choosing my own future, not as someone saved or discovered, but as the talent I'd always been, finally recognized. The ring on my finger meant partnership now, between equals who'd chosen each other. And there it is, Susan's complete journey from humiliated waitress to celebrated chef. What did you think? Did that opening night give you chills? Drop your comments below and tell me, what time is it where you're watching from, and what city or country are you in? I love hearing from viewers all over the world. If this story moved you, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear about standing up for themselves, and subscribe for more tales of justice and empowerment. Remember, your worth is never determined by who validates you. You create your own success. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.